We all love some me time in life. Escaping to a remote location far from the noise and stress of modern life sounds like the perfect way to enjoy yourself away from usual work and people. But solitude can quickly turn into terror for those who have dared to venture off the grid into isolated cabins, deep forests, or distant wilderness. When you're miles from civilization, with no help in sight, strange and unexplainable events can push the boundaries of fear. One, the haunting of the mountain cabin. I always enjoyed being alone, so when a friend offered me his remote cabin in the mountains, I jumped at the chance. Far from the chaos of city life, the cabin was surrounded by miles of dense forest. At first, it was perfect. The quiet I love, the peaceful days spent hiking, reading, and relaxing by the fire. But soon, that peace turned into a nightmare. One night, I heard a distant thumping noise coming from the woods. I ignored it as an animal, but it grew louder. The next evening it returned, now with faint whispers, almost like voices. When I looked outside, I thought I saw a shadow moving through the trees. Things became worse quickly, and more nights passed with the same weird sounds. I found small stones arranged on the porch, placed as if by someone or something. Then, I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing motionless on the trail. I froze in terror, but before I could move, it vanished into the trees. That night, the whispers and the thumping became unbearable. In a panic, I grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, desperate to confront whatever was haunting me. The whispers grew louder, but when I looked back at the cabin, I realized they weren't coming from the forest, but they were inside. The door was wide open, the whispers echoing through the dark cabin. Terrified, I fled, leaving everything behind. I've never returned to that cabin, but I can still hear those whispers in my nightmares. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. It was waiting for someone to wander into its domain, alone. Two, the stranger in the store. I grew up in a small one-horse town in Kansas. My parents owned a little general store, and they worked hard to make ends meet. When I wasn't at school or hanging out with friends, I helped out in the store. It was nothing major, just small tasks to keep me occupied. One day, a strange man came into the store. He gave me a scary feeling, and every time he came around, I would try to avoid him. He would always lurk around the aisles, never buying much, just hanging around long enough to make me uncomfortable. One afternoon, my dad stepped into the back, leaving me alone with the man. I tried to move to another aisle, but when I peeked around the corner, he was there, staring at me with a creepy smile. I froze. He walked over and knelt down next to me. I wasn't really scared, just deeply uneasy. He started saying weird things like, "You're special," and "You're so precious." When my dad came back, the man quickly left, and I told my dad what had happened. My parents were very upset and told me to never let strangers get that close to me again. The next time the man came in, my dad threw him out of the store, banning him from ever coming back. A few years later, I saw the man's face on the news. He had been arrested for something truly horrifying. He had been living in isolation in a broken-down house far from town, and his crimes were much worse than I could have imagined as a kid. I realized then how close I had come to something terrible, and it's a memory that still makes my stomach turn to this day. 3. The screams in the woods. When I was 12 years old, I attended a boys' sleepaway camp in the Carolinas. The camp was nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by hiking trails, streams, and a large lake. For the most part, the camp was a fun experience, filled with outdoor activities like archery, swimming, and hiking. But there was one night that I'll never forget. It was a Thursday evening when the counselors took us out to a fire pit in the woods for marshmallows and campfire stories. Everything was going well until we heard a loud snap in the trees. The counselors fell silent, their expressions turning serious. We thought it was probably just an animal, maybe a bear, which wasn't unheard of in the area. We quickly packed up and began walking back to camp. As we walked, we heard a noise that sent chills down my spine, a loud, piercing scream coming from deep within the woods. It didn't sound human. The counselors looked at each other, clearly unsettled, before telling us to run. We ran through the woods as fast as we could, the sound of the scream following us the whole way. When we finally made it back to camp, the rangers were there waiting for us. The counselors explained what had happened, but the rangers' search of the area turned up nothing. No signs of animals, no traces of anything unusual. It left us all shaken. For the rest of the week, things felt different at camp. Some of the other kids were picked up by their parents early, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there in the woods. Whatever made that noise has stayed with me ever since, a haunting reminder that not everything in the forest is harmless. Four. The Watcher at the edge of the camp. In the summer of 2006, I went to a sleepaway camp located in a remote area surrounded by dense forest. The camp was pretty standard, with small cabins, a large lake, and lots of outdoor activities. It was my first time at camp, and I was excited to be there. But one night took a dark turn that I still can't explain. It was the last night of camp, and all the kids gathered around a large campfire to roast marshmallows and listen to spooky stories. The night was calm, with a gentle breeze and clear skies. As the counselors took turns sharing their favorite stories, something strange happened. We started hearing the sound of footsteps in the woods. At first, everyone thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or some other wildlife. But the footsteps were too heavy, deliberate, and slow. One of the counselors grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the sound. That's when we saw it. Standing just at the edge of the forest was a tall figure. It wasn't moving, just standing there watching us. Even in the dim light, we could all feel the presence of something, yes. Someone staring at us. The counselor called out, but there was no response. The figure didn't flinch. The counselor quickly told us to gather our things and quietly head back to the cabins. We walked in a tight group, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept glancing back over my shoulder, but the figure remained, unmoving. It didn't follow us, and eventually it faded into the darkness of the trees. The next morning, the counselors acted as if nothing had happened, but I could tell they were still on edge. To this day, none of us ever found out who or what was watching us from the edge of the woods. It could have been a prank or something harmless, but the feeling of dread that settled in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. These unsettling experiences remind us that the most terrifying things are often the ones we can't fully explain. Whether it's a stranger with dark intentions, spooky noises in the woods, or an unknown figure appearing just out of reach, the unknown can be far scarier than anything we can see clearly.